Today, we're going to take a look at my custom 2022 Forbidden Dreadnought. Okay, before we dive into all the details, let's take a look at some of the criteria I use to help with all my decisions. I've had a lot of injuries and surgeries over the past decade. I ride with a fused back, I've had 3 shoulder surgeries, I've had a knee surgery, I shattered my right heel, and I had that fused as well. And so I'm looking for a bike that really helps soften the trail. I ride the Sea to Sky corridor, usually the North Shore or Squamish, but sometimes up in Whistler, and things can get pretty janky. I tend to like more technical, kind of dark blue, low black technical trails more than the super fast flowy stuff that you'll find up at the Whistler Bike Park. But I needed a bike that could handle both because my son loves the stuff in Whistler and I want to keep riding with him as long as I can. So basically I was looking for a bike that could smoothen out the jank but also manage some time up in the bike park. I'm also not getting any younger, and as you get older, and you older guys know this, you younger guys, you're gonna know this, ergonomics start to matter more and more and more. I wanted a bike that really fit my body. That goes for frame size. It also goes for cranks, bars, back sweep, all of that stuff. I really paid close attention to it so that my body fit my bike as best as possible. The goal here is that I can ride as long as possible and as many days as possible. I have a lot of really fit friends and I also ride with some younger guys, and if I don't keep that stuff in mind, I'm fucked. So here you go, let's dive into all the details and talk about all the decisions I made on this build. I know high pivots have been around for a while, but I was first turned on to them when Eric from BCPOV first started riding the Forbidden Druid. I love the idea of the rear traveling axle path along with the reduced pedal kickback from the high pivot design. I was ready to sign up for anything that helps smoothen out the trail. With a low pivot design, when your wheel hits a rock, root, or an obstacle, it tends to rotate forward, which is the opposite direction of the obstacle. With a high pivot design, the wheel rotates rearward, which is the same direction of the obstacle. That tends to smoothen out the trail. But with that rearward traveling axle path, you get chain extension, which pulls on the chainring and causes pedal kickback. And that can cause a bumpy ride as your legs feel the pull of the cranks, and that's where the idler pulley comes in. It removes that chain growth and takes away the pedal kickback. Smooth like butter. The only issue I had with the Druid is that it only had 130 mils of rear travel, and I was looking for more squish. But the rumors were swirling that Forbidden were working on an enduro frame with a little bit more travel, and soon after they announced the Dreadnought, with 154 millimeters of travel in the rear and a recommended 170 millimeters up in the fork.
I was asking myself, like, could this be my only bike? And I don't know if that's what it's about. I think that for somebody who really just wants to charge the downhills and is going to put a bike in over its head whenever they can, this bike is really laser focused on what it does, and I have never ridden a bike that does it as well as this.
And right around the same time, they announced the Ziggy Link, which allowed you to ride both the Druid and the Dreadnought as a mullet. I'm a touch under 5'8", and having that option to have a smaller rear wheel to prevent that butt buzz on the steeper sections and to give me a little bit more maneuverability, it's exactly what I was looking for. Set up as a mullet, the Dreadnought comes in with a nice and slack head tube angle of 63 degrees. That just gives me a little bit extra confidence on the steep and gnarly sections. I went with the size small, which has a reach of 435 millimeters, which is a perfect fit. When you multiply my height by 2.55, it lands bang on at that 435 millimeter mark. The rad of my setup comes in at 825 millimeters, which is also perfect. My rad measures 810 millimeters, and I like my bikes to be 10 to 20 millimeters rad plus. All right, let's dive into the suspension. I went with 170 millimeter EXT ERA V2 Fork. It has 36 millimeter stanchions, just like the ever popular Fox 36. The cool thing about this fork is the first bit of the travel is run by a coil. That coil spring on the top of the stroke offers frictionless movement, which is designed to help with small bump compliance. For the shock, I went with the EXT Storia Lock V3. I knew I wanted a coil shuck on this build because I was looking for maximum traction and I wanted to feel super planted on the trail. I don't pop and spring around like a lot of the playful riders out there. I tend to be more point and shoot, so I knew a coil shock would probably be the right choice for me. So I scoured the internet to see what some of the best coil options were out there, and the EXT came up time and time again. The only downsides I could see with this shock were that it's pretty expensive and it tends to make a little bit more squish noise than some of the competitors. But they designed it that way to keep the oil flowing freely and performance running at its maximum. Currently, it's mounted with a 325-pound spring. Forbidden actually recommends a 300-pound spring for my weight, so I'm going to get that swapped out in the next month. For the drivetrain, I'm going with Shimano XTR, but there's a little bit of a kink in that plan. XTR wasn't available when I put this together, so Cam from Bicicleta put on an XT cassette and an XT derailleur, but ordered up the XTR parts and they'll be coming in the next little while, and we're going to move to those when they do. I'm not a weight weenie for this build, but I was really paying attention to Unsprung Weight. I wanted to make life as easy as possible on the suspension, and Unsprung Weight makes a big difference. So when paying attention to weight, anything that the suspension had to deal with was top of mind. So XTR made the bill. So some of you out there are probably asking, why didn't you go with SRAM Access? And yeah, I hear it's amazing, but it is a little bit heavier, and that is Unsprung Weight, and I really like how Shimano's Hyperglide Plus feels shifting under power. For the cranks, I wanted to go with 155mm. I wanted to minimize pedal strikes, and I wanted a comfortable position for my height on the downs. I ended up going with the Set by 5 Dev. They're aluminum tough, and I think they look amazing. One issue with these cranks with my setup is they're SRAM compatible. So in order to go with them, I ended up getting a chainring made by Wolftooth. They make a chainring that's SRAM compatible for the cranks, but have Hyperglide Plus compatible teeth. Speaking of weight weenie and Unsprung Weight, with this wheel set, I went with BERD Spokes, the spokes made from string. At 2.5 grams each, they're about half the weight of a steel spoke, but have 12 times the strength to weight ratio. And they more effectively dampen vibrations, which translates to a smoother ride. I went with 28 spokes rather than 32 on both the front and rear wheels. I'm a lightweight rider, and I was looking more for compliance to smoothen out some of the jank, rather than have a stiffer wheel that I could push into. For the rims, I went with the Revel RW30s, which are made of a thermoplastic carbon and don't use the brittle epoxy found in your typical carbon rim. And you can really notice the difference in how that rim feels. When you flick this rim, you get a light dud to it rather than that sharp ping you get when you flick a typical carbon rim. These rims are light and durable and give a dampened feel to the ride. The other advantage of fusion fiber over your typical carbon is it's less environmentally harmful. These rims can be recycled, and if you damage them and send them back, Revel will recycle the material. And speaking of damaging them, these rims have a lifetime warranty and crash replacement. For hubs, I went with the Industry 9 Hydra. They're lightweight and super high engagement. For tires, I'm running what is probably the most popular set here on the shore. On the front, I'm running a 2.5-inch Maxxis Assegai with max grip for a little bit of extra grip. In the rear, I'm running a 2.4-inch DHR2 in Max Terra for a little bit extra rolling speed and a little bit more slideability. I'm a lightweight rider, so I can get away with lighter casings. I'm running an XO Plus in the front and an XO in the rear. Knock on wood, so far I've had pretty good luck with flats, and that allows me to keep the wheel set a little bit lighter, which is good for unsprung weight and the suspension. For the brakes, I went with the 4-piston SRAM G2 RSCs. They're easy to service, and I've had them on bikes in the past, and I like the way they feel. I'm a lightweight rider, and I prefer modulation over a sharp bite. For rotors, I went with a common setup for enduro riding with 203s up front and 180s in the rear. For the dropper, I went with the Bike Yoke Revive. It's lightweight and it has a reset valve to remove any air from the shaft if you get that terrible dropper squish. I also really love the trigger for it. For the saddle, I went with the SQlab 611 Ergowave Active. It has a wave-like shape to it with a raised rear end to support your ass and a low nose to give clearance to that sensitive perennial nerve. SQlab will send you a fit kit to measure out your sit bone to make sure you order the right width. The saddle also flexes from side to side when you pedal, which is good for your back and limits the pressure on the sit bones. Okay, now let's take a look at the cockpit. For the bars, I went with the SQlab 311 FLX with a 30mm rise. These bars have more flex than almost any other carbon bar on the market, and that's good for my shoulders, arms, and wrists. Traditionally, I've run 1-up bars for the same reason. But after measuring my arm angles, I realized I should be riding with 12 degrees of back sweep, and the 1-up only came with 8. Having the proper fit of back sweep to your upper body really helps with shoulders, arms, and wrist fatigue out on the trails. So I found these SQlab bars that had the 12 degrees and had the full flex pattern. This bar only comes at 740 millimeters wide, which is a good fit for me, but they also make the 30X, which is 780. For grips, I went with Revgrips. They're expensive, but I do find they take a little bit of buzz out of the trail. My stem is made by Wren Sports. It's aluminum and comes in at the amazingly light 72 grams. Mine's 40 millimeters long, and when combined with my bars, puts the effective length at about 25 millimeters, which is perfect for handling and stability. And there you have it. That's my custom 2022 Forbidden Dreadnought.